Hi everybody, this is Ryan again, lesson 14 of working with JavaScript. In this lesson we're going to be looking at arrays. So let's link to an external file again and also have our div where we can output some information. I have my anonymous function where I can start working. So first of all, let's discuss what is an array. An array is a very special variable that can store multiple values. It's actually a object in JavaScript. So to create an array called fruit, I would need a new child object of the array object. So I'll say new array. Remember, the new creates a child of that parent object. So each item of fruit can be allocated using a numeric system in square brackets. We call this the key of the array. So 0, 1, 2 are different keys, or slots if you'd like to think of them as a slot where you're storing a value. So there's my array. If you want to output any of these, you could just say block.innerHTML. I love to eat apples. Okay, now another way of creating an array, which is a bit shorter, is you could say new array, and we could have carrots, potatoes, cabbage, onions, so on. To add one of those entries to our array, you would say square brackets. Okay, so the way this is working is this would be slot 0, slot 1, 2, and 3. So if I want cabbage, it would be 0, 1, 2. Okay, so it's much shorter using this syntax where you can define an array all on one line as opposed to doing each slot separately. Even shorter than this would be just using square brackets instead of a new array. Okay, so to display one of these hobbies is exactly the same thing. Let's add a BR. I enjoy. Let's say I want to enjoy cliff diving. It would be element 0, element 1, element 2. I enjoy cliff diving. So we can make use of some of the nice features of the array object with its properties and methods. One property that we have is the length property. So we could say block.innerHTML. There are veg.length items of vegetables. There are 4 items of vegetables. So the length property would know how many items there are in total. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 different vegetables. And we can actually use this inside of an array. So let's say we want to output an entire array. To output the entire fruit array, I could say block.innerHTML is equal to fruit. That would give me a comma separated list of all the items in that array. Another way to output an array would be to use a for loop. So we say for declare variable, initialize it to 0. I initialize it to 0 because remember all arrays begin at 0. And then we would say x is less than, if I want to go through the fruit array, I need to know how many items of fruit there are. So I could say less than 3, but much easier I could just say fruit.length using the length property of the array that we just learnt about. X++. Now what's important to understand here is that we're using a less than instead of a less than or equal to. The reason for this is because the array starts at 0. So even though there are 3 items of fruit, we would start at 0, so it'd be 0, 1, 2. We wouldn't want to go all the way up to 3. Square brackets x. Remember, x will first be 0, then 1, then 2. So it will give me each item of fruit. Let me just remove the previous output so you can see. I probably want a space between, or a BR or something. Look what happens if you use less than or equal to. Then you get the last item as undefined because it doesn't exist. So just remember, starting at 0, you need to be 1 less than the length of the array when you output it. Another very nice loop in JavaScript, which we haven't looked at yet, is known as the for in loop. I'll give you an example. So you say for y in hobbies, as an example. That doesn't have to be y, that can be any variable. But that there must be the name of the array that you want to loop through. Then you would say block.innerHTML plus equals hobbies x, or y should I say, because y is my variable. And then I'm just going to put a BR as well in between each one. And there you can see skydiving, bridge swinging, and cliff diving. So much easier to use a for in loop than a normal for loop. This loop is actually quite intelligent because it knows where the beginning of the array is, it knows where the end of the array is, and it knows it needs to increase by 1 every time to go from the one item to the next item. So it's kind of like your initialize, test, and modifier all in one. Just remember, this only works with objects, and the array is an object, so we are able to loop through that object using the for in loop. Now let's look at some of the built-in methods. Remember, a method is a function that belongs to an object. So the array object has a whole bunch of functions built into it. We call them methods. So let's start by looking at the pop method. The pop method is used to delete an item from the end of an array. So if we go veg.pop, that will end up deleting the last item from the vegetables array. I'm just going to remove the for loops for now. Okay, to output the vegetables array, I'm just going to go block.innerHTML equal to veg. It's probably the quickest way to output an array. It will be comma separated. So I've got carrots, potatoes, and cabbage, but what about onions? Onions was deleted because of the pop function. And interestingly enough, the pop function also returns the last value that it deleted. So if you want to use a return value, remember you need to either output it or store it into a variable. So I'm creating a variable and outputting that variable. And now I'm just getting the last item from that was removed from the array. It still has been deleted from the array, but now it's actually displaying it for me. The opposite of this pop function is the push function. The push function allows you to add items to the end of the array. Obviously then it doesn't return a value, so you just put the items that you want. Let's say knitting, needlework, painting. And now to output the entire array, I'm just going to go hobbies. I should have actually said hobbies.push, otherwise it's going to add it to my vegetables array. So in addition to the hobbies that I had at first, it's now also added in knitting, needlework and painting. Instead of push, I could have also done unshift, which does the same thing but adds them to the beginning instead of to the end of the array. So now it's put knitting, needlework and painting before the previous items that were there originally. And then there's also the shift function, which deletes an item from the beginning of an array. Just like the pop function deletes an item from the end of the array, shift deletes an item from the beginning of the array. So you can see we're now missing skydiving. Skydiving was the original first item of the array that's been deleted. Just like the pop function returned the value of the last item, the shift function returns the value of the first item that was deleted. So if we want to make use of it, we can store it in a variable and then just output that variable. Another nice method that's built into the arrays is the join method. The join method takes an array and joins each item together. So what we could do is we could say block.innerHTML equal to fruit.join, and that should output the entire fruit array with commas in between each item. This is actually doing the same thing as just saying block.innerHTML equal to fruit. But the nice thing with the join method is that you can give it a separator. So if you tell it that dash is going to be the separator, then it will use a dash in between each item of the array. Or you could even do something like and then it will put the word and in between each item of the array. So what join is actually doing is making a string out of the array. It's taking the array and creating a string. You could even use a BR if you wanted to go onto the next line in between each item, which actually lands up being a hang of a lot easier than using a for loop. Okay, another nice function is the ability to sort the array. So to sort an array, you just use the sort function, and it will sort it in alphabetical order. You could also reverse the array using the reverse function, then you should get it in descending alphabetical order, so in other words from Z to A. The sort function has a funny effect when working with numbers, because by default the sort function always sorts alphabetically. So let's quickly create a new array for numbers, and you'll see what I mean. If I sort this array, nums.sort, and then I output it to the screen, so I'll just say nums.join. There you see a list of all the numbers, but the problem is they're all in alphabetical order. So we've got 10, then 100, 234, then suddenly we've got 45. Okay, so we need to find a way to sort this numerically. And to do that, you have to write your own custom sort function. So you could say, make an anonymous function called function. Just give it two arguments, a and b. A would represent the very first number and B the second number. So we say return A minus B. That's the algorithm we use to sort something numerically. There's the answer. Everything is now sorted in numerical order from the smallest number to the largest number. We could do it the other way around by just saying B minus A, and then we'd land up with the largest number first and then the smallest number last. And of course you could customize the algorithm depending on how you wish to sort your array. And that brings us to the end of looking at arrays. You can always go and Google for some more methods that we use in the array object. There are one or two others, but we've looked at the most important ones.